It's Thursday. Yud Beis Tevis Tovshin Ayin Tes. We're on Teres Menachem. Sefer HaMa'amorim Tovshin Yud Gimel in the Mamar Vayihiyu Bnei Yisroel Bamidbar Shabbos Parshas Shlach. We are on the top of page Kuf Hey. The Rebbe is discussing now the two modes of revelation in the divine energy above, starting from the lowest level of Atzilus Malchus, going all the way up to Ein Sof Shalifnei Tzimtzum, God's infinite light before the first contraction. And in each one of these, in all of these levels, we have two modes, limited and unlimited. So in the first instance, the Rebbe explained the two aspects, limited and unlimited, in Malchus, the lowest level of the 10 divine attributes of Atzilus. Now he's moving on to the Midas, to Zoh, to the Eirampin, the emotional divine attributes of Atzilus. Mainly focusing on Chesed, being that Chesed, the attribute of Chesed, is one that joins each of the attributes in Atzilus, as explained in the previous Shiur. And the Rebbe is explaining that despite the fact that it's Chesed, nevertheless, there are revealed Chesodim, revealed Chesed, and covered Chesed. Revealed Chesed allows for the possibility of Yinika L'Chitzonim, seepage outside of the domain of Kedusha. Chesodim HaMechusim, Chesed, as it is still wrapped in the intellect in which it stems, does not allow for Yinika L'Chitzonim, for seepage to that, to the aspects that are outside of Kedusha, of godliness. And to support that, he brought a verse, a pasuk from Mishlei, and the pasuk is Le'yachpeitz ksil bitvuna ki'im bi'izgalus libay. The fool does not desire tvuna, understanding, but rather the revelations of his heart. The implication being that if one isn't a fool, meaning if the intellect is present and dominant, then one cannot be a fool. A fool is one that wants only the revelations of the heart, meaning to say, when the emotion is still wrapped in the intellect, there cannot be any Yinika, any seepage to that which is outside of holiness, outside of godliness. And the Rebbe explained that the word bitvuna, which means understanding, has the letters ben ubas, son and daughter. Son and daughter in the divine attributes is a reference to chesed and gvura, or ava v'yira, right? Bitvuna means as chesed and gvura, as the emotional divine attributes are still wrapped in and dominated by the intellect from which they stem. The difference between, and the Rebbe is explaining the difference between bitvuna and bina. Bina also means understanding. That's the more common term that we find in Chassidus, in Kabbalah. Chochma, bina das. What's the difference between bina and tvuna? It's not just another word to say the same thing, but rather bina means the intellect itself, the understanding itself. Bitvuna means as the emotional attributes are still wrapped within the intellect. Ben Ubas, still the son of the daughter, meaning Ava V'yira, Chesed and Gvura, still wrapped in the intellect. So we are 5 lines from the top. The word starts L'Chitzonim. We're at the second word on that line, the Af. The Af she'enan mechin ki midos, for although we are referring to the emotional attributes rather than the intellect, therefore it is not referred to with the term bina, ki'im b'shem tvuna, but rather with the term tvuna, which, as noted, is already a reference to the emotions, the emotional divine attributes. Mikol mokem, nonetheless, despite the fact that we're talking about the emotional divine attributes, harehem klulim ha'sechel, they are wrapped up in the intellect, as it's written in the writings of the Arizal. The Arizal writes concerning, he brings a verse, a pasuk, from Mishlei, also from Mishlei. Al Posik, Mayim amukim belev ish. There are deep waters in the heart of man. V'ish tvuna yidlena, and a understanding person, a clever person, yidlena, can draw it out. What does that mean? So what does the Arizal write on this verse? The Arizal writes on this verse, the tvuna hu ava v'yira kluna b'seichel. It's a reference to, tvuna is a reference to ava and yira, love and fear, meaning chesed and gvura, as they are still wrapped up within the intellect. And specifically bina. V'liyoyisam kluna b'bina, being that they're still wrapped up within bina, within the understanding, within the intellect, v'nirgish b'amei rabina, and what is felt is the light, the energy of bina, of the intellect, of the understanding. Therefore, therefore there cannot be any seepage from these emotional divine attributes as they are within the intellect, as they are within bina. This is not the case when we talk about revealed emotional divine attributes, which are deficient in bina, in understanding, meaning to say that it's already the emotion, as it is detached from the intellect. Then after there's a possibility for there to be a seepage from them, from the emotional attributes, to aspects that are outside of holiness, outside of godliness. Shezeu mashakosov. This is the meaning of the second part of the first verse that the Rebbe brought from Mishlei, that the fool does not want the intellect, but rather ki imbi is galas libay, the fool wants the revelations of his heart. Shechafetz baza. That's what he wants. In other words, when the emotion is already detached from the intellect, what's the desire? Where is one focused? One is focused on the emotion. He wants that emotion. Avdem bar steiter. He insists upon it. Because from here there could already be a seepage. Meaning to say, as discussed earlier, when the emotion is still wrapped in the intellect, so the focus is upwards. The focus is on the intellect. The focus is on godliness. When we talk about the emotion, meaning the feeling that one has already, and similarly in the divine attribute, the focus is on the self, not on the godliness. Therefore, that already allows for a potential. Once the focus is on oneself, on the I, rather than on the godliness, on that which is higher, there's a possibility for unika, for seepage. So this is, so first the Rebbe explained Malchus. Now the Rebbe just finished explaining Midos, which is the next level up, these two dimensions, the limited and the unlimited. Now the Rebbe moves on to Meichin, to the intellect itself. When we talk about the intellect, in the divine attribute of Bina, there is the possibility for breakage. What does that mean? Ki yodua the Shem Sag hu bebina. As is known that Hashem's name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is known as Shem Sag, Shem Samach Gimel, the name of 63, is a reference to the attribute of Bina. And the breakage, when we talk about the Shviras HaKelim, when Kabbalah and Chassidus talks about the breakage of the vessels, it is referring, in the names of Hashem, it's a reference to Shem Sag, the name of 63. First of all, concerning the name of 63, we explained at length in one of the previous Shiurim last week or 2 weeks ago, that in Hashem's name Yud Kei Vav Kei, there are different miluyim. There are different ways. In other words, when you take Yud Kei Vav Kei and you spell it out, Yud, you spell out, it's not only the letter Yud, but you spell it out as Yud Vav Daled, and the Hey you also spell out, and so the Vav and so the Hey, the last Hey, there are different ways of spelling it out. There's Shem Ab, the name of 72, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei, B'milu Yudin, Yud Vav Daled, Hey Yud, right? Vav Yud Vav and Hey Yud. 20.
We did it in the previous Mamar.
Sorry?
We did it in the previous
in this Mamar, but in an earlier Shiur.
Oh.
Shem Sag, the 63, is Yud Kei Vav Kei, also with Milu Yudin, with Yuds, besides the Vav, which is spelled with, I believe, with an Aleph. So Yud would be Yud Vav Daled, is 20. Hey Yud is another 15, is 35. The last Hey Yud is also is another 15, is 50. And then the Vav Aleph Vav is 13, is 63. Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? Now, in the names, so we know that Shviras HaKelim, the breakage of the vessels, it's a bit Kabbalistic, is in Olam HaToyu, the world of chaos. That's the realm that precedes Atzilus. Right? So the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei correspond to the Sfiras. Yud is Chochma, Hey is Bina, Vav is the Midas, and Hey is Malchus. Right? It also corresponds to realms. In the realms as we know them, Yud is Atzilus, Hey is Bria, Vav is Yitzira, and the last Hey is Asiya. Right? But also, more generally, the Yud is Akudim. That would be or rather, in other words, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the Shem Ab, the name of 72 would be Akudim, I believe, right? Shem Sag would be Nikudim, which is Tohu, right? Shem Ma would be Atzilus, and Shem Ban would be Bia. Right? So just like in the detailed dimensions. So again, Shem Ab, Sag, Ma, and Ban is Yud Kei Vav Kei as well, in the more general sense. So just like in Sfiris, you say this, the Hey. The first Hey is Bina. So in the more general sense, just like in the Sfiris, Hey is Bina. So in the more general sense, that's a reference to Tohu. So the bottom line is Shem Sag and Bina are related one to another. Right? It's the idea of Gvuris. Bina is the idea of Gvuris. It's in the Kava Small. It's in the left line. Right? Tohu, the breakage of the vessels, is also, when we're talking about the very powerful Eiris, is the idea of Gvura. And the breakage of the vessels is the idea of Gvura. So bottom line, without getting too technical in the Kabbalah, Shem Sag is that's where the Shviras HaKelim took place. In Shem Ab there was no Shviras HaKelim. It was only in Shem Sag, right? That's related to Bina. So Bina, in other words, there is a potential in Bina for what? For some Yunikal Chetzenim, some Sibish to the exterior. What happened in Shviras HaKelim, in the breakage of the vessels? It fell into Klippa. The divine sparks, the Nitzutzes, as it were, fell very low into Klippa. So Sag, Tohu, Bina are related to one another. So therefore, in Bina, when we talk in intellect itself, the aspect of Bina, the second of the two intellectual spheres, divine attributes, allows for the potential for Yunikal Chetzenim Sipish to those areas that are outside of godliness. This is not the case when we talk about the divine attribute of Chachma Ksiv, Yom Musu they will die, v'loi b'Chachma, but not with wisdom. Right? What does that mean? Not with wisdom. What does that mean? They will. The deeper definition of the pasuk means that Yom Musu, where is death possible? In other words, that's a synonym for Klippa, for the aspects that are outside of Kedusha. V'loi b'Chachma, in Chachma, in the wisdom divine attribute, there is no possibility for what? For Yunikal Chetzenim, for any seepage to those aspects that are outside of Kedusha. In fact, it also says, B'chochma is biriru. Chochma is responsible for birur, for refinement. So, and as mentioned earlier, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, Chochma is bittul, nullification to godliness. It's completely focused on godliness. Therefore, what's dominant in Chochma is godliness. Therefore, it doesn't allow for any Yunikal Chetzenim. Whereas once you get into Bina, which is already responsible for Gvura, it's already focused slightly to the outside, again, the same idea, it allows for aspects that are outside of Kedusha to latch onto it. So again, the Rebbe, in Malchus explained these two aspects, the limited and the unlimited, that which allows for seepage to those aspects that are outside of Kedusha, and the higher aspect that does not. Similarly, in the emotions, in the emotional divine attributes, in Zoh, in Chesed particularly. Now that Rebbe explains it in Meichin, again, Bina allows for that, Chochma does not. The next step, the Rebbe is going to go into Keser, which is higher than the intellect, and then he's going to go even to the level of Eidos of Shidduch Tzimtzum, Hashem's divine energy, which is before the first constriction, Again, the idea being that you have two modes in each at each of these levels, and there's a necessity to retain the connection to the higher one in order for things to work out as they should. Continue Mitzvah tomorrow.
But even like Mechusim, yeah, that there is access. So the Mekmilin or the Mechusim, there's no access for the Chitzonim, yeah. Does this mean that there's no access for us as well? So to say.
Of course there is, because we're not Chitzonim. We have a godly
No,
soul.
but like. So what is the when it says like Minika Chitzonim?
When, in practical terms, we're talking about a person to retain his connection to Kedusha.
Yeah,
and not to stray into other areas that link, that focus on the upper, on the unlimited, the connection to the unlimited, to look upwards instead of on oneself.
Chitzonim is not us. It means like it's.
Also within us, the Nefesh Elokit, Nefesh Bamid, the Yetzer Tov, the Yetzer Hara.
Yeah.
So you have this in every structure. You have these two dimensions: in the human, in the world, in the Sfirot.
Yeah.
And they mirror each other. So in the first part of the Mamar, the Rebbe explained all of this as it has been Nefesh Adam, and Avodas Adam, a man service of Hashem.
Yeah.
Now the Rebbe says, that where does that come from? It comes from the divine attributes, from the Sfirot. And he explains these two modes in each one of these aspects.
Understand.
The world,
I understand.
the world
Yeah,
is
yeah.
Olam Katan Zeh Adam. Whatever you find in the world, you find in man. Whatever you find in Gashmis, you find in Ruchnis. So you'll find these two modes in each structure.